Wow, these are exciting times we live in. The situation changes just about every day. I think we could all just sort of take a whole different direction in life every time we wake up. It's quite exciting and a bit nerve-wracking, but we certainly live in exciting times. I've been predicting for a while now that America was quite possibly at the brink of a war, and that we shouldn't be surprised if it happened, especially as we approach the November elections. And more plausibly, after the election, depending on what happens and regardless of who won. There just seems to be unrest in the cards. But as I've been watching the culture froth and grind against itself, it seems to me that we were dividing along ideological lines, conservative versus liberal, which was turning out to be party lines, Republican versus Democrat. But then I watched a video by Dennis Prager explaining that it was the radical left that was setting itself up against us all, Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives. That was interesting. And then the coronavirus came upon us, and there has been a taking to the streets, pitting the stay-at-homes against the return to works, or more accurately stated, the comply with the government versus the movement perceiving that something more is going on here. Do you ever get, when you watch the news or read the internet, get the sort of feeling in your stomach that something fishy is going on here? There's just something going on. And so we perceive that there is something more afoot. And there are many people who are saying we should take a stand now and not be like the pre-World War II Europe. There's a brewing crisis, as we know, about vaccine versus no vaccine. I saw on the news last night that they were saying a survey in the country was just about 50-50 on vaccine versus no vaccine. There's certainly concern about surveillance and government overreach, with all the talk about contact tracing, mandatory location technology, and possibly even implantations to verify that you've been tested and have the vaccine and that we always know where you are. Of course, it's for your safety, but if you don't get this, you will never again be able to buy or sell or work or travel. That in itself is sort of a terrifying scenario. But all through the corona crisis here, there's been a political battle that's been going on for quite some time, sort of Trump versus Pelosi, Biden versus his own deteriorating mental condition, and against his own party, socialist versus centrist Democrats, the media versus everybody, and continues to bubble, toil, and trouble. The country is just churning, and there have been morality civil wars, primarily pro-life versus pro-choice, but there are also morality civil wars about sex education, about gender education, and even leftist education, which talks about removing anybody white from the American historical record. And of all things, into the midst of all of this cultural anger and incivility and confusion, George Floyd is killed by what seems, by all appearances, to be racist, hateful policemen. And we're back to racial war in the streets. Black Lives Matter, Antifa, the National Guard, armies of cops, and the destruction and looting of people's places of business that were trying so hard to survive in the midst of the corona shutdown. It's just chaos And anarchy every day brings something new. What are we supposed to do with all this? Now, I might as well add to the mix some of the other cultural forces that are working tirelessly to tear America apart. There's an ongoing rights war between the LGBTQ plus community and Christianity. Both sides are screaming discrimination as the LGBTQ groups have fired one legal cannonball after another to get Christians removed from the public square, to get their businesses shut down with the accusation of sex discrimination. And the Christians fight back with a mutual accusation of religious discrimination. Now, in addition to that, the Freedom from Religion Foundation never stops annoying Christians like ticks in a field and mosquitoes in the summer with one frivolous, baseless threat and lawsuit after another, never stopping their bullying threats and intimidation tactics. And atheists, I know because I talk with them online all the time, are getting more aggressive against Christians. I've been told, not just once, that Christianity is the most dangerous force on the planet. The atheists use the term Christofascism, generally within the context of American politics. There's a term dominionism, which is Christian-based white supremacy. There's a view out there that anyone who doesn't vote Democrat is trying to establish a Christo-fascist, kleptocratic state where any atheist will be dragged from their homes and shot. It's absurd, but the fear-mongering is real. But I'm not done yet. Add to all of this that there's a force of global Islamification at work. Sometimes subtly, sometimes not so subtly, exporting millions of refugees around the world, implanting sleeper cells in countries and around in those countries, changing school curricula to exclude Christian expression, but to include Muslim teaching, and even entering political office to manipulate the legislative arms of various nations toward Sharia law. So, here's my take on it all. I know. I don't think these various groups, most of them don't really want physical violence against other human beings. But I think the anger is so pent up, and various trigger events are bringing them out, but it's like a box of tinder in a lightning storm. I don't think we really hate each other the way it seems, but we are ready to blow. And the wrong event by the wrong party at the wrong time could just make it boom. So here's what I think. I think we're being set up to all of this. What I just talked about are the symptoms, but not the real causes. You know, when you go to the doctor, you can tell him about your symptoms, but the doc, yeah, he can prescribe medicine, he or she, to relieve your symptoms, but what is really the issue is what is the real cause. And I think there's a force at work behind all these cultural wars. And we're focusing so much on the issue at hand that we're neglecting to look at the man behind the curtain and seeing what's really going on. We are being manipulated like marionettes by a greater nefarious power who lives and operates in the shadows, not on the front page of the newspaper. We are led to believe this is between red and blue, black and white, left and right, LGBTQ and Christians, Islam and the world. But we are stooges playing out somebody else's stratagem. Now, I've been doing some study in recent times about Luciferianism. Yeah, you heard that right. Lucifer is in there. Luciferianism. Now, lest you start smirking already and think I'm seeing a red-horned Satan behind all this, stay with me for my explanation. Luciferianism is not blatant Satanism. It's not blatant religious mythology or blaming the devil for all our problems. The easiest way I can say it is that Luciferianism is the spirit of secularism, the spirit of the world, let's say. It's also called secular humanism, scientific materialism, or even atheism or agnosticism. So when I say Luciferianism, you're not to think of the Satanic Bible or the occult or satanic churches, though it's true that those are a way out there radical branch of Luciferianism. What it is mostly is the idea that we don't need God. We can do this ourselves. And actually, the idea of God is problematic at best and dangerous at worst. The idea of Luciferianism started way back in Canaanite mythology. You know, the Canaanites, which has a tale, in the Canaanite mythology, has a tale of the morning star falling from the sky. Now, God told the Jews in the conquest, drive these people out of the land. And the battle has never stopped since between Yahwism, Christianity, and Luciferianism, the idea that we don't need God, we can do this ourselves. In ancient Greece, it's Prometheus, the god of intelligence, of the arts and the sciences. He represents human striving, but also deceit. Luciferianism was influenced by the Gnostics. It's the priority of knowledge, education, and wisdom, as if Christians were against such things. But that's even the ancient setup. In Judaism, it is represented by Lilith, the goddess of the night, the symbol of wanton sexuality. So you put all this together, and what Luciferianism is a symbol of enlightenment, of knowledge, of independence, of human progress. And it posits itself against a political religion based in science and the arts. It posits itself as a political religion based in science and the arts. It is the arbiter of truth. It is the source of truth. Its true enemy is anyone who disagrees with it. So it's very intolerant in that sense, and especially intolerant of religious people. Now, let me mark out a little more clearly and easily what Luciferianism is. It's the New Age, protection of the natural world, and that God is in us. We need no other God than what is in us. It is the exaltation of the arts and sciences. The arts and sciences are the sum total of all knowledge. It's the primacy of education, because the God of the Bible dooms people to perpetual ignorance. It's pragmatism, everything taken in its practical aspect, what works, what doesn't. It's individuality, you get to choose, self-determined choices. Therefore, it's worship of the inner self and one's ultimate potential. I am divine. I am the arbiter of truth. I am the arbiter of morality. You can hear this, that this is our culture. It's secularism. We don't need God. Spiritual things, that's something of the past. We can handle things by ourselves, by technology, by science, by our own knowledge, our own wits. Morality is defined as what is good for humanity. And we can handle this. We don't need a deity to tell us what's good and what's right and what's wrong. And it's also that all ideas should be tested and proved by science. before being accepted. And that's the idea of scientism. Scientism leads us to all knowledge. There is no knowledge other than science. See, hopefully all of this sounds familiar to you. What's playing in the background of all our cultural battles currently are these ideas. I hope you can hear that that's the case. We are the pawns in someone else's chess game. We are at each other's throats, slowly tearing this country apart with animosity at a fever pitch. But it's all a misdirection. We are so busy fighting all the fires about corona, LGBTQ rights, racism, vaccines, contact tracers, and Sharia law that we are missing the arsonist. Many people don't even realize there is an arsonist. They think we're just living in tough times. Don't fall for that. There's a man behind the curtain, using us as pawns to set up his own rise to power. There's an arsonist working around the clock to make sure that Rome burns. The plan is to burn down civilization and to burn down as many economies as possible so that he can enter as the Savior Messiah. It's all part of a plan. But many don't see it because the real players are still working in the shadows, and we're paying too attention to what's in our own backyard. See, the source of all this is a spirit of secularism that has been growing through the millennia, but especially through the last century, and especially then the last couple of decades. Do you see how it's picking up speed? And especially in the last couple of months, do you see how it's picking up speed? It's the spirit of secularism, which is more technically Luciferianism, but I know people balk at that name. I don't care. What it is it's the spirit of this world. Here's what it is, and you tell me if this doesn't sound accurate. The Wiccan movement, combining environmentalism with religious constructs. It's the New Age movement, joining East and West into a new one-world religion. It's nihilism, the rejection of all authorities and institutions. We become our own authority. It's narcissism. I am all that matters. It's hedonism, the primacy of pleasure. It's the new atheism, academic liberalism, free thinking, center for inquiry. It's secularism. We don't need God. We can do this ourselves. God's not here anyway. It's scientism. Science can answer all our questions. Science can explain everything to us. And certainly this is better than faith that believes in things you can't even prove. It's LGBTQ+. Sexuality is whatever we want it to be. Sexuality is unbounded by morality, science, or gender. It's eugenics, the master race. Destruction of the undesirables. Genetic research. Science. It's pragmatism, utilitarianism. The values are what works. The values are what is practical. It's the exaltation of the arts and sciences. It's the primacy of education. It's worship of the inner self and one's ultimate potential. It is morality that is focused on what I think is good and what I think is right. And it has nothing to do with deity or objectivity. Boy, that's what's going on. That's what's going on. It's the spirit of the world that's behind everything that we see happening. And I could trace through history for you how all this has come down to this moment in time. Looking back, we can chart its progress. But that's a different video. Regardless, here we are, scratching at each other's eyes and scratching our own heads. We're protesting in the street, while the power that is engineering it all, they're sitting in a safe, dark place, watching us tearing each other apart, waiting for the right time to step in, and they are planning their next step. Now, you want to know, who are these people? Don't we all? The spirit of the world, the spirit of secularism, has indeed risen to a position of global power and is even now capable of global conquest, but under a variety of movements and multiple names. And there's intent in that. First of all, it's so that no one recognizes that it really and truly is Satan at work in these human hearts and movements. And also so that, too, that it's much harder to connect the dots, so that no one connects the dots to see all the tie-ins. In that way, they can get away with it. So here's my list. I'm sure I have a few wrong, and I'm sure there are more than what I'm saying, but this is a start because I want you to think. Number 1, the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Number 2, Planned Parenthood. Number 3, socialism and the radical political left. And remember, I said that's different from liberals. And it's different from Democrats. I'm not saying partisan there. I'm talking about the radical political left. The left is just as much against liberals as they are against conservatives. Number 4, New Age spirituality. Number 5, the new atheism. Number 6, the technocrats of our world. The leadership teams of Facebook, Google, and Twitter, Instagram, and the major tech companies in the world like Apple, Huawei, and others. Number 7, it is the rich and uber-powerful individual people of the world, such as George Soros and many, many others. Number 8, it is religious leaders, such as the Ayatollahs, the Pope, and various patriarchs of religious hierarchies. Number 9, it is the political leaders of China, the United States, Europe, Russia, and more. Number 10, it is leaders in the scientific community, and it's big pharma. Number 11, it is various entities of the United Nations, if not possibly the United Nations itself. Number 12, it's global companies like Disney and Amazon and Microsoft and Apple and Google and so many others. Now at this point, you're probably raising your eyebrows, shaking your head and going, oh, come on, Jim. You know, you may have been with me for a while, but now you're saying, you just named all the world leaders. You know, what in the world makes you think there's a single purpose and a single cabal holding them all together? And here's what I'm saying. You just need to connect the dots. It's easy to see who's sleeping with each other and who's having each other over for dinner. This is not a huge challenge. If you make a list of all these things and then look at how they tie together with each other, there are intersecting bands and all sorts of networks between these entities and individuals that I am mentioning. The political left, big pharma, the United Nations agencies, global companies, scientists and medical leaders, universities, the world's most wealthy. They are in league with each other. It's the spirit of the world. And what's their point? What's their goal or their purpose? Their goal and purpose is world domination. And who's standing in the way? We know who's standing in the way. Who's standing in the way is the Spirit of Christ in the world. Now, I didn't say Christianity, because so much of Christianity is weak and it's apostate. What's going on for real is the spirit of secularism, which technically is Luciferianism, versus the Spirit of Christ in the world. And the Spirit of Christ in the world is veritable truth, justice, morality, and the real God and real knowledge. In other words, it's Antichrist versus Jesus as the true King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So what's to do about it? What's to do about it? Number one, it's time for Christians, true Christians, to be aware of these things. And others in the church will oppose you. Other churches will oppose you. But it's time for true Christians to come to an awareness of these things. Wake up. Take your blinders off. Pay more attention now that I and many others are showing you the back room where the real deals are happening. Don't pay attention to the poker table. Go to the back room. That's where the action is happening. Don't be a stooge and play into their hands. Number two, it's time for true Christians to get your spiritual lives in order. Jesus talked about this so much. Grow up. The church is weak. People are biblically illiterate. They are politically unaware, and they are culturally afraid. It's time to step up the plate and do what is necessary and take every step to train as a soldier for Christ. The battle isn't coming, it is upon us. It's time to take our stand against the wiles of the devil. Number three, it's time for true Christians, therefore, to take a stand. Rise up. Now, we still have to discern when to hold them and when to fold them, when to walk away and when to stand our ground. Discernment and wisdom never leave the picture, because I'm not just talking about aggression all the time. There is a time and a place for submission. There's a time and a place for strategy. But the time is upon us when what I tell you in the dark, speak in the daylight, and what is whispered in your ear, proclaim from the rooftops. Number four, don't be deceived, because Satan works to deceive even the elect, if that were possible. But a magician draws your attention over here to where he wants it to be, so that you miss what's really going on. It's deliberate misdirection. Don't get wrapped up in the obvious. Oh, yes, the corona crisis exists. The vaccines, contact tracing, racism, Islamification, sex education, yes, yes, yes. All these things matter. We don't ignore them or pretend they're not real. They matter, but they're a misdirection. They are pitting us against each other so we don't see what's really happening and where the battle really is. So start looking behind the curtain. What you see on the news is real. Well, some of it is real. But what you need to see is what's behind it, that's being hidden from us. There's something going on that we are not being told, and it's back in the shadows. Be smarter than just wringing your hands over the news. Look deeper to see how deep the rabbit hole goes, because there is a rabbit hole. Number 5, the real players are working. Here's one of their primary goals. Besides power, the real players are working to bring down the legitimate church. One of the ways to do that is to get Christians to fight with each other. They are bringing down the world's economies to plunge us into need and chaos. They are falsifying religion, falsifying education, falsifying politics, falsifying science, falsifying the media, and through tech companies, even falsifying reality. Did you get all that? Don't fall for it. Look deeper into the rabbit hole. Look behind the curtain. Wake up. Grow up. Rise up. Number 6, therefore, we need to talk to each other. The job is too big for any of us. If we were all the eye, where would the sense of hearing be? And if we were all the ear, where would the sense of smell be? The job is too big for any of us. We are the body of Christ. And we need to cooperate and work together so that we get the information we need. The forces against us are well established, well experienced, and well financed, and they have tremendous worldly power. It is only by banding together as fellow soldiers in Christ that we can put on the full armor of God. And putting on the full armor of God is not just an individual responsibility, it is a community responsibility. We are the body of Christ. We are the family of God. We are the children of the King. But our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers and authorities, and against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. And it's time to do something. Be alert. Find out what's going on. Take your stand. Work for Jesus Christ.